And I know you're going to have more estimates to come on the financial implications of this, but I spoke to folks after Sandy who they were looking at models in St. Petersburg, Russia. You also mentioned in the Netherlands, where giant seawalls. And I know New York City looked at that and thought at the end of the day that it was probably impractical from a price tag standpoint. Do you get, and I'm overstating this, but do you get the idea that lawmakers, they've been presented with a lot of the evidence, but they look at their budgets and say, buddy, I'm just trying to deal with this on a year-to-year basis. I can't deal with major infrastructure. I can't deal with planning that's going to be, 3 or 4 successors of mine down the road. It seems to me that we either have a decision to say we're going to not build anymore in certain places and basically move to higher ground, or we're going to have to do major infrastructure in this country at major expense, but it has to be more coherent than state to state or town to town. Doesn't it have to be national?
Well, yes and no. FEMA, through the federal insurance rate maps, has a great say into what happens. And FEMA will have to reconsider over the next few years whether or not to build sea level rise into their rate maps. The National Oceanographic and Atmospheric Administration, NOAA, which advises FEMA, is looking into this matter, and they are coming up with very similar figures that we have. But ultimately, yes, you're right. The local municipalities, particularly New Jersey, are between a rock and a hard place. But most obey or follow the guidance provided by the New Jersey DEP, which is why actually it's very important that the New Jersey DEP consider raising their so-called safety margin, which is 1 foot above FEMA, to 2 feet, because then the municipalities at their own risk can choose to follow that or not. My town and Ware Town, the town follows the DEP regulations. So again, I have to build now to at least 10 feet above mean low water. In terms of going forward, infrastructure is as controlled by, let's say, PSE&G and the major utilities. It's controlled by the New Jersey Transit. It's controlled by the people who own the rails, the people who, New Jersey Department of Transportation, by the Turnpike Authority. These organizations are looking very seriously at sea level rise. Particularly New York has provided a model, but New Jersey, these organizations are also following. You might think back to the electrical problems that we had, the electrical supply problems during Sandy. That's because our infrastructure was built over 100 years ago when sea level was, in that time, in this region, 40 centimeters, that is to say 16 inches below present. And that 16 inches of rise at Atlantic City anyway had contributed to these areas being flooded. So we must consider how we improve our infrastructure in terms of power, water, and other things, supplies. So yes, this goes beyond the municipal level. But at the municipal levels, it's very difficult often for local mayors to really address the problem. And the best poster child for that is unincorporated Long Beach Township, which includes Beach Haven and Holgate. Mayor Mancini had 25 holdouts who refused to have the Army Corps of Engineers nourished the beaches and rebuilt the dunes. As a result, the destruction in the southern part of Long Beach Island was rather massive compared to the northern part of Long Beach Island, where the mayor had invoked eminent domain to get the holdouts out of the way, and the beach was nourished in 2009 and 2010. And that beach nourishment and dune replenishment protected Harvey Cedars, protected Loveladies. So yes, there's many things we can do to help the local mayors and councilmen.
I'm curious, when you sit around with the other geoscientists, both at Rutgers and even with colleagues elsewhere, do you say, people don't want to hear this, but there's going to be, another Sandy in the next 5-10 years. We're going to see these things are going to even be more intense. What's the likelihood, beyond just the sea level rise, that the intensity of these storms are going to become a lot more frequent and not just once in a generation?
We had several meetings at Rutgers here, both for stakeholders, policymakers, and other scientists on these topics, both the week after Sandy and earlier this year. And basically, yes, storm intensity is likely to increase, but there's other mitigating factors. And one of those things is that the sea level is higher and continuing to rise. In the case of Sandy, its unusual track, which brought it into New Jersey, unusual in the sense that no historical storm has followed such a track into New Jersey, is in part due to the fact that the Arctic sea ice is melting. And that's affecting how basically the planetary highs and lows in the atmosphere, okay, or storms, determines where they go. So we will see potentially more of those types of storm tracks that Sandy took in the future. But even if the storms weren't more intense, we're really looking at sea level being the factor that helps determine what the storm surge is going to be. You can think of a storm as a very short-term sea level rise, as is a tide. So if you add together the storm surge with the tidal cycle with the long-term sea level rise, that's where you're seeing an increase in flooding. And it's the sea level component in addition to the stronger potential storms which makes that happen.
Last question, and I try and put this as much in personal terms, but your Jersey Shore home, do you think your grandkids are going to be able to enjoy it in the same way that you do and your kids do now?
My grandkids, it's sending a chill up my spine because I'm really not sure. We can protect it, but already in Waretown during a normal northeasters, all the storms drains are overflowing and backing up into the streets. We can raise the streets. We will raise the streets. It's going to affect things, though, because in certain areas we're inevitably going to lose marshlands. Our marshlands, we don't appreciate it. My house was built in what was marshland, though. And the marshes basically help protect against the storm surge, but they're also nurseries for fish. They're basically areas with very high production of organic matter. They do a lot of good things. And when you raise sea level, the marshes naturally move inland. But if you built a house in a way, we lose those marshes. And so, yes, we're going to look at a different Jersey Shore and a different pattern in the future. I hope my grandkids are able to enjoy our shore house, and I think they will. We've already been elevated on pilings to 9 feet above the 7-foot flood mark. So we're already, that 11 feet, I said you had to go, we're already 8 feet above that. I have a heater room, though, that's on the bottom, which is in the flood zone. So that's got to be moved. My street has to be raised. We must do other things to help protect the infrastructure also. It's going to cost money, and that's really ultimately the decision is to where is this money going to come from and how are we going to value our shore real estate. The New Jersey Shore generates a tremendous amount of tourists and dollars each year. Basically, it's an economic engine, and we can't abandon it.
This is obviously a conversation that's not going away anytime soon here, but the report that Dr. Miller and others put together at least helps educate the conversation. Doctor, I appreciate a few minutes. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Rich. It's been a pleasure to be here.